Hello, I'm Nick.
And I'm Kieran.
And this is our review of the Nike Alphafly NEXT Percent 2. So the Alphafly 2 is, of course, the successor to the original Alphafly. It's a very exciting shoe with many leaks around the internet in recent weeks, but it's finally now officially launched. Nike has really billed it as a long-distance marathon racing shoe to allow room for the street fly and the Vaporfly. But, you know, really it's a great racing shoe for lots of distances, even if it does lean towards those longer events. So, some of the key details. Start with the price, which is a bit dodgy. Nike still hasn't confirmed the price to us, which is a bit annoying, but we're going to assume it's the same as the original, which was $259.95 in the UK, or $275 in the US. That was the cheapest colorway. The price did rise with various special editions. We'll put more detail in the video description if we hear anything else on the price from Nike ahead of launch. The weight has gone up a little bit from the original Alphafly. In my UK size 9, my two shoes weigh different amounts. It's 244 grams for one and 251 grams for the other, which is like 8.6 ounces for the lower weight there. And Nike lists it as 249 grams in a US 10 or UK 9. Nike has also told us it's an 8mm drop, which would be double the drop on the original Alphafly. I will say, I never really felt that the original Alphafly was a 4mm drop. It always felt higher to me, and this feels like that as well. So yeah, we've got 8mm drop listed, and obviously it goes right up to that kind of 40mm limit set by World Athletics at the heel. Compared to the Alphafly 1, there are a few kind of minor updates that do change the feel of the shoe. That starts with the upper, which is now Atom Knit 2.0. That really involves a lot more structure around the heel as you try and create a more solid hold on the foot during your runs. They've also slightly changed the overlay over the toes on the shoe, which hopefully will create a kind of less restrictive feel around there. But in general, you're still getting good solid hold on the foot with this upper. It's quite a structured knit to the point where it can be quite hard to actually get the shoe on, which is why there's two pull tabs to kind of help you with that. Now the midsole has the same ingredients as the Alphafly 1. You've got obviously a big Zoom X foam midsole, Nike's PIBA based, very bouncy, springy foam, plus the dual Air Zoom pods at the forefoot there, which you don't get on the Vaporfly. That's designed to create a little bit more energy return in your toe off. And to that end, compared to the Alphafly 1, Nike has now added a little strip of Zoom X foam under those Air Zoom pods. Again, just to provide more bounce and spring in the forefoot and a little bit more cushioning in the forefoot as well. You've obviously got a full-length carbon plate, and you can see more of it than ever before because the midsole cutout underneath is bigger than on the Alphafly 1. And then you've got a redesigned outsole. So the pattern on the rubber has changed, and it's also a thinner material to kind of reduce the weight, but also actually create the room for that extra foam underneath the Air Zoom pods there. You've got the usual forefoot coverage, generous forefoot coverage, and then the two strips of rubber at the back, which does create quite good coverage. In terms of durability, I've not seen any kind of problems after 82K so far. The shoe's also got a wider base at the heel to create a bit more stability than you had with the original Alphafly, although to be fair, stability is never going to be the key kind of feature of the Alphafly with such a big high stack of soft foam. And then you've got a slightly redesigned kind of spike at the back there, which is a bit more wedge shaped, which is very tempting to put your foot on when you're taking the shoe off afterwards, but don't do that because there's a good chance you're going to rip the midsole off the shoe. All right, Kieran's back. We're going to talk about the fit of the shoe first. Kieran, could you get the shoe on your foot?
Like the first Alphafly, with great difficulty, to be honest. It was a bit of a struggle. Mainly, I've got quite kind of high and wide feet, and just getting them initially in kind of through that sort of opening was a real struggle. They've obviously got two pull sort of tabs on them to help with that. So I think it's something they're clearly aware of. But overall, the fit was, very, very snug for me. Once I got them in, they tended to loosen off over the sort of the runs that I did a little bit, but it's still very snug. There's enough length in the toe box. It feels quite nice and compact around the foot, but getting them on and off is a nightmare, and it caused me a couple of problems with forcing my feet in. Basically made the cushioning around the heel counter and above the heel counter not sit right, and so I had some rubbing. Would I go half a size up? I don't really think so. It's a bit maybe. But I have the same problem here, Nick, to be honest.
Yeah, when I put these on, I think before you, and I thought as I was pulling them on, it was quite hard for me, and I thought, oh, Kieran's going to struggle here. But I've got quite a narrow foot, and I found that the first time it was a bit of a struggle to get them on, but since then they've actually gone on quite easily, and they hold my foot pretty much perfectly. I've had a lovely fit around the heel and everything, so completely great for me, true to size. But yeah, I do have a narrow foot, and they fit quite well, but I think it's something to be aware of. They are a bit of a struggle to get on if you do have a wider foot. All right, on to the run test. We've both been logging in, some miles, as many miles as possible, basically before this embargo. Kieran, you didn't use the Alphafly 1 a huge amount, but how have you found the Alphafly 2 compared to that? And then really just how have you found the ride in general?
Well, I mean, first I couldn't really get my foot into the Alphafly 1, so I didn't run in them a great deal. It was too much of a struggle, but I found those a little bit unnatural underfoot. I found them a little bit clunky. I've always been a fan of the Vaporfly. I've just found them to be a little bit more kind of my kind of shoe, a bit more sort of minimal, a bit more normal, if that's the case with the carbon shoes. But with these guys, I've done around sort of 50 miles. That included, I've done a kind of fast sort of mile interval set. I've done a full marathon attempt that I got to mile 21, for reasons I'll come on to. And I've also done a really sort of slow and easy kind of half marathon, just to see how they are when you're maybe kind of moving at a slower pace with sort of slightly different form potentially. And I think overall, this has been a surprise for me, this shoe. Not only did I run my fastest ever mile on that kind of mile kind of interval challenge, I also have found them just to be really fast and punchy over all of the miles I've done. They still, to me, feel a little bit abnormal when you first put them on. It's still a strange sensation that I'm not entirely in love with, but boy, do they shift when you're out there and you're running with good form. A lot of what I was doing was kind of on nice kind of flat, even kind of tarmac roads. And, the miles were in loops, but not too twisty, not too turny. I do feel like they're basically a bit softer, I think, than the original Alphafly. But boy, I mean, the pop for me was kind of staggering. I mean, I was on tired legs doing that kind of mile interval session, and I wasn't expecting to be able to run that fast. I do feel like these are giving me, 10, 15 seconds per mile. On the marathon test that I did, I went out and what I did was I did every 6th mile as a fast kind of marathon pace or faster mile. The reason being I couldn't run the whole thing at marathon pace because I'm training for something else. But just to see how that went out with the kind of fatigue over time. And actually, they definitely helped. Even on to mile kind of 18, 19, I was still able to take that pace up a notch. And yeah, on not really sort of proper training for this, it was still clocking out kind of sub 7-minute miles, which would be close to my kind of marathon pace. And I think you definitely feel the benefit. These are shoes for me that I know Nike says they're designed for going out and chasing marathon PBs. And my instincts off these runs that I've done is absolutely that's the case. I think they're great. I've really enjoyed them. Apart from the one thing with getting my feet into them was difficult, and then having that kind of there's a bit of heel discomfort. It started to rub on my left foot, and I struggled to get that into position on all the runs that I did, and it did cause blistering, but not so severe that I wouldn't take that risk if I was going out to run a marathon. But how about you, Nick? How have you found it?
Oh, good. Before we go into it, why did you not finish off the marathon? Was it because of the heel, or was it was unrelated to the shoe?
Yeah, exactly that. I got to mile 21 and it was just cutting a little bit deep, and because I'm about to go and do a kind of crazy 70-day sort of running mission, I couldn't really risk going further. In terms of my legs and how they felt generally underfoot, they were definitely going to carry me easily through that kind of last sort of 5 miles. And I think would have been, in that last 5 miles or 6 miles of a marathon, you're always finding it's always going to be difficult, and you could feel the benefit of these even that deep into the race. So overall, I was happy with them, and without that little bit of rubbing, I think they would have been, bang on. But yeah, I had to call it early.
Well, I love the Alphafly 1, as kind of anyone who's watched the channel will know. I use it as my main marathon shoe. I did a 2:29 and a 2:33 marathon in it last year, so I was very excited to get my hands on the 2. It is, like the first one, I think a very different shoe when you're running slow compared to when you're running fast. It's a bit wild to step in it, and as I jogged down for my first run, which was a hard session, I was just warming up. I was going, feels weird, like it's a bit too much. But as soon as I started running fast, first session was I did like a 5k, reasonably steady, then 8 hill reps, and then 3k fast, and it just felt amazing. Like I've done that session in so many different kinds of shoes, including much nimbler, lighter racing shoes, and I'd have thought the Alphafly would be a bit too much for running kind of 3k reps, but it was the best I felt in that session. It protects the legs so well, and the transition is just absolutely fantastic in the shoe, I think. Even, as a shuffly heel striker, I find that it just beautifully rocks me forward, and I get probably even slightly more pop now from the forefoot. Like I've always liked the Air Zoom pods in the original compared to, just the pure foam of the Vaporfly, but a little bit more foam in the new version under those pods probably helps a little bit, adds a little bit of spring there. Obviously, it probably helps as well that my Alphaflys are quite old, my originals, and this is a new shoe, and it felt amazing as a result. But yeah, I was really impressed on that first run. And the second run, I think, actually, though, really gave more of an impression of this shoe, which was I went out to do my long 90-minute Sunday long run, and I'd lined up a long straight section on good surfaces where I thought I'm just going to ease through the gears here and just run hard, kind of on feel and heart rate, and see what I kind of, what I turn out. And I was just chipping out basically 325s, 330s, like kind of a marathon pace without even feeling it at all. And it's just really superb when you are in those conditions. But on that section, I did have one about turn on slightly slick tarmac, and then immediately the shoe that has disappeared on the foot in terms of its size and weight suddenly reappears, and you kind of have to be very careful not to slip over and turn an ankle, because it is a big shoe and it is really built for those kind of perfect conditions. And then it is built like as this long distance shoe, but the Alphafly 1 I think was a fast shoe at any distance if you had the right conditions. And I'm up in the Forest of Bowland on holiday at the moment, and there's Fleetwood Promenade Park Run just down the road, which is an out and back 2.5k out, 2.5k back on perfect concrete on a promenade. And I thought, oh, this is perfect for this shoe. I did go out and I was really expected to be quick, and then bang, the worst day of all time in terms of headwind came out my way. So the first half was into a 25-mile-an-hour headwind. I hit the turn and I was basically cooked, and then just kind of recovered and ran fast at the end. But the shoe did feel great, I'd say, on that. Even at those quicker race paces, if you're on that flat kind of straight terrain, I think it's just as good as anything out there, despite the fact it is a fair bit heavier, just because it's so efficient and springy and just really helps you keep going, and does kind of tip you forward a bit, not as much as the Vaporfly, I'd say, but you are still getting that kind of tippy forward feeling from the plate and the foam. And then the Zoom X foam, I think, is still probably the best on the market, I think, in terms of energy return, and it just feels very explosive. But it is pretty built for long. I did a long run. I did 20 miles in it yesterday through the Forest of Bowland, just on undulating roads. Again, running to feel, and just, I'm a pretty experienced runner at this stage, and normally I can tell, my perceived effort level normally equates quite well to pace and heart rate. But yeah, this shoe is mad, like how much faster I was going than my perceived effort level at times. Certainly on downhills, when you're just flying down and with all that foam springing you forward. And I will say the roads around here are very good though. That's why there's so much cycling here. There's no potholes and all that kind of stuff. So it was perfect for the shoe. But on one slightly cambered road, where they have the drainage leaning to the side, it did feel a little bit kind of unwieldy, and I had to move up into the centre of the road to get good running conditions in it. So it's built for purpose. It's certainly true to say, but I think it does all the stuff the Alphafly 1 did for me, but a little bit better in that you are getting a bit more kind of power and spring forward, and when you just settle into a pace, it just locks in, and that really can be any race pace. I think it just feels amazing until you have to turn around, more or less.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, the other thing that I tested, so I went out and did a sort of very sort of slow, easy run. It was like a group social run, half marathon distance. There was a bit on tarmac, there was a bit of river path as well thrown into that. And, so we're moving then at kind of 10, 11-minute miles at times. And I wanted to see how it would hold up against those kind of conditions. I think the other interesting thing for me about the Alphafly 2 versus something like the Vaporfly is I actually felt like when I was running slower with a kind of sort of slightly rocked back kind of heel sort of form, maybe a little bit more ragged, I thought it was more kind of versatile under those conditions as well for me personally. I thought that big kind of platform of that Zoom X foam that sort of runs almost kind of evenly across the bottom, I think gave a good kind of cushioning and good kind of platform to run off. I guess there's sort of that extra added width that's there in the kind of forefoot, and the heel is probably contributing to that. And I was surprised by that, actually. I think, again, I always sort of talk about shoes that you might put on if you're not really sure whether or not you're going to hit your best times, particularly over a marathon. There's a risk that in those last few miles you're going to be hanging out and you might get a bit ragged. What shoes are going to support you if things don't go quite according to plan? I think that these Alphafly NEXT Percent 2 do a little bit more of that than the Vaporflies. I find the Vaporflies, there's only one way I can run in them, and that's running with really good form. They're not so good when you're struggling. So I thought that was really interesting. But I totally agree. I mean, the bounce off these shoes, I think is quite remarkable. I think it's much more pronounced than a Vaporfly. I think the Vaporfly are much more kind of direct in terms of how they feel on the ground, which kind of might sound crazy for a carbon plate shoe. But yeah, it was sort of noticeable. Again, I agree, getting those extra, you can feel like 15 seconds, per mile, the benefit in these shoes. It's really kind of, I don't know, it's kind of blew me away a little bit, particularly doing that fast mile as well. I went out and I've basically ran two of my fastest miles in these. The first one I did a kind of a 5:50, and I thought, well, I'll give it another go. Had an easy mile, and then went again and got a kind of a 5:30, which is faster than any mile I've ever run. So, you're always going to feel positive on it. A pair of shoes are delivering that, right?
Yeah, I think you basically have to not look at them and trust them to do their job. Because if you look at them, this isn't going to be quick as like a Vaporfly, a nimble Vaporfly. But actually, like I say, if you get the conditions, you get the surface, I do think they're as fast as anything, really. And you've just basically got to trust the fact they are a bit absurd, but you just can't you can't rely on that. They do have a little bit more stability with a wider heel base, but I still think stability is always going to be a slight struggle with them on twisty courses. And there's certainly, I ran a race last week on a mix of terrains and with lots of little turns. And on broken ground, I always think actually with a lot of carbon shoes, if the ground is broken, potholey, and the tarmac's not great, you don't get that full ground contact from them. You don't get such an impressive spring off them. But yeah, in the right conditions, line up straight, go run very fast. The Alphafly is incredible.
Yeah, I mean, that is one caveat that I've got, is that they are an odd shoe. When you first pull them out of the box, they look a bit too much to me. It's a bit like, wow, I've got a pair of moon boots in my hand. And then you put them on and they sort of feel slightly alien. And it all feels a bit, I don't know, there's a part of me which feels like, is it overstepping what we should really be doing? And then you feel the bounce and you're like, okay, part of you is like, wow, this is fantastic. I'm definitely going to be running fast. And, who doesn't like getting a PB? But I actually think if you gave me, if I was sort of purist, which one I prefer to run in, just for running kind of pleasure and feel on the foot, I think I still prefer the Vaporfly. If I wanted to go and chase a race sort of PB, I think I'd now be putting on the Alphafly.
All right, so the verdict on the Alphafly 2, for me, this is a fantastic shoe. It's like the Alphafly. It's more Alphafly than ever, essentially. It feels like they've taken the already outlandish formula of the Alphafly and just tweaked it to make it a little bit more crazy and, purposeful. And I think they have improved the shoe for me. The ride is better. I love running the shoe. I think it's slightly built for purpose, in that if you're not going for a really good marathon or even half marathon on very straight roads, then it might not be your top pick, and it's very expensive, but it does its job. It does its job just superbly well. It really protects the legs. Like I said, I did 20 miles yesterday. My legs feel great today, having not done 20 miles for a while, just because it provides so much cushioning and bounce. So yeah, I think for me, it's a tick in terms of its net improvement. And is it going to be a top contender for marathon shoes? I think certainly. How about you, Kieran?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a convert now. I think, Nick, I put in 32 miles in this shoe over the last 2 days, and I've woken up today and I can go out and run again. So that was the marathon tested, the half marathon as well. And yeah, I'm really surprised, but my kind of the biggest kind of compliment I can pay to this now is that Vaporfly was always my kind of race shoe. If I was going to go and run a half or a marathon, and this shoe I would definitely now be lacing up to go and chase PBs. Perfect conditions. This is a city marathon shoe as far as I'm concerned. Put it on for those kind of long, straight, kind of flat city marathons. Perfect. But in my head, I want to put this on and go and run something like Berlin or Chicago, and I think you lap it up basically. It does still feel a little bit unnatural on the foot, but yeah, if I had to now choose one race shoe to go for, and I think that would be for me as well, over any kind of distance, I'd go mile, I'd go 5k, 10k, half and marathon. The Alphafly NEXT 2 has just squeezed into the top of my list. One thing I have to do is work out how to stop it cutting into my heel, but I'd take that even over the 3 hours if I was chasing the PB.
But I am doing Berlin this year. It's my big race. I start actually Berlin build up today, and this shoe, just landed at the perfect time for me. I'm now, having done, like I say, 80k in testing, I'm probably going to wrap it up and not use it again maybe until quite near the marathon. But yeah, I think it's my top marathon racing shoe. I think I agree. There are certain races at any distance that I think it would be the best pick for, but a lot of the time, if you are doing 5k, 10k, you end up on tiny little twisty courses when it just maybe won't be the perfect one for it. But I think it's still very expensive. That's one thing to consider, and I do think, for me, someone in a typical year, I'll probably line up 2 big target marathons as my biggest goal. It'll probably be worth the investment as the best shoe for those purposes, 1 or 2 halves on very good conditions as well. But if you are someone who's not so fussed by the marathon, or your marathon isn't Berlin or London or something like that with those straights and all that, then maybe you're going to find better value by going for a lighter, nimbler shoe like the Vaporfly or the Metaspeed Sky Plus, something like that. That is cheaper, probably will serve you maybe slightly better on twisty courses, maybe better on 5k, 10k overall, and then in the marathon it's still an amazing shoe, obviously, but it's maybe hasn't got quite the straight line oomph that you get from the Alphafly just because of the extra kind of foam you're packing here. And then the only other thing to say is maybe that I do think this is an improvement on the Alphafly 1, but for me it's not night and day. I think there's a huge leap there, and because it is very expensive, this shoe line, if the Alphafly 1 is now available for £150 less, then maybe I'd still be looking at that if you're not. If you want to make a good saving and still have a very, very high level of performance in a similar feel to this. So I think that's a little judgment to make because, these are very expensive shoes, even compared to other carbon shoes. All right, that's it, guys. That is our review of the Alphafly NEXT%. We're going to have a couple of versus videos going up, so if you want to dive into loads of depth on how it compares to the Vaporfly, the Alphafly, a couple other carbon shoes maybe, do go watch them. Please like, subscribe, ring the little bell, and I guess we should say goodbye now. I'm going to say goodbye.
Goodbye.